Hello and welcome to this video, which is about my third book. The book is entitled The Polychronicon A 35-Year Adventure. So this is a fiction book. My other books have been non-fiction so far. So this is a fiction book, and it actually tells a real story, a true life story, which took place over 35 years. Now, if you've heard of the game Dungeons and Dragons, you will soon know what this is all about. This book, The Polychronicon, it indeed says that it's a 35-year adventure, because what happened was a group of people, and I was one of them, we played the game Dungeons and Dragons from 1980 up to 2020. And this book is an account, day by day, of the first 35 years of those 40 years. We got to 35 years and I was up to date with my writing, and so we decided to publish it at 35 years. We were planning on publishing the final smaller volume for the last 5 years, but we didn't do that because unfortunately our dungeon master, David Franklin, whom we were truly grateful for providing his dungeon master skills for our game for all those years, sadly he died in 2020. So we did not in fact put the last 5 years into the book. However, nonetheless, it is actually a very good story, and I'd like to show you the two versions of the book. This version here is the most expensive version. This version is a hardback. It's got almost 400 pages, and it's in full colour, and it's a good quality book, full of maps and details and things like that. And we'll have a look at those in a minute. This is the most expensive version, and this is not available on Amazon, and it's not available generally in the shops. It is very expensive, but you can get it, and I'll show you where you can get it at the end of this video. There's another edition which is identical inside, and it's the same quality of printing. You can see that inside, but it's slightly cheaper. Actually, it's about £20 cheaper, I think, because we published this in perfect bound, which is like soft cover, and that cut the cost down no end. But you can see in either case we have a really high quality book. One other little difference between these two books is that this one contains the dedication to David Franklin in the front, because we produced this only recently, whereas this version was released in about 2019, 2015, something like that. Anyway, let me show you what's in the book and tell you something about it. One feature that it has is right at the very beginning, and I'll show you this now. It explains a few details about the Dungeons and Dragons games for people who are not familiar. So, for example, it explains about alignments. We have good, neutral, evil, lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, neutral good, true neutral, and neutral evil, and then chaotic good, chaotic neutral, and chaotic evil. It explains that these are like personality traits, actually in real life humans, but they're particularly important when you start playing D&D. There's a little shot there of an actual game going on, which doesn't seem to be very much. This is a scene because we always played with scenery. David built scenery fantastically, and we had a full tabletop, and we could go through woods, we could cross rivers, we could go up mountains and down hills and valleys and so on. We played in this absolutely consistent universe for those 40 years, including of course the first 35 that are recorded in this book. And this is the world which we inhabited, and it was divided into, as you can see, 18 sections, and we visited most of them, but I won't particularly concern our time with describing any details about these, but you can see at the bottom here is a South Pole which is frozen, and at the top is a North Pole which is frozen, and there's equatorial regions here which are desert. And we travelled through the vast majority of that area. This, for example, is region 1, which is called the Elfenlands, or the Great Forest. And we trekked here, and all this, what happened to us, is all described in the text which we'll get to. There's another area there, region 2, the islands of Polychronicon, which is also known as Vallon, and then the Valley of the Ancients, and our trek through there, and then a very well populated area here, which is the city-state of the World Emperor, and then next we have the city-state of the Invincible Overlord, and there were, of course, matters going on between these two great emperors. And then these are the desert lands here, which you can see from all the red tracks. That's where we went, and it's all described. As I say, there's nearly 400 pages of this. An area we didn't explore very much, the barbarian Altanis, which we didn't go very far, but Lenap, this is the Lenap area with sea and mountains and green forests and deserts there, and those are the places those were the areas of the world which we actually visited and stayed in, and which are described during the narrative which carries on. There's a brief list here of the towns and areas which we visited, and the main cities and some of the characteristics. And then here, these are some of the players, earlier characters here, and we have these little miniature people, and you can put those on the board to represent where you are. But we go a bit later to find the characters that we're playing. These are some of my earlier characters. TTG, his actual name was Tarkin Trollsbane, which is how he came to be called TTG, and then Straker. And then we move on from the earlier characters. We will get to the characters that we spend the most time with, who lasted the longest. So as I move through, this chappie is called Tass. He was a fighter. Of course, also we have character classes like fighters and healers, you know, and that kind of thing. Well, I had a fighter, and he was called Tasselhoff Barefoot, and we called him Tass for short. And this is my other character here, who was a doctor, and his name was Dr. Rowan Thekla, and he was just known as the Doctor in our various events. And there are archers and magicians and all kinds of other people here. Very wise chap here, Salazar, who was our colleague called Steve, looked after him. So when you get to page 43, you get to the start of the actual adventure. And this started in 1980, and by the way, the chronological dates as we go through these big events that happen are all documented. There are two dates that concern us. there's the real-time date. These pages here took place in 1980, August and September. The real-time date, and then there's the game date, which in this case, although it was funnily enough, it was September and August in both the game date and the real-time date, but except that the year in the game time was 4,332, whereas the year in the actual time that we played this episode was in 1980. And this tells us about where we started. And it maps the route here that we took, and it tells us what happened almost day by day in most cases, what goes on. Of course, we were very inexperienced, both as players and as characters, when we first started. And in fact, there are those two dimensions. There's your experience as a player, and there's your experience as a character in the world where this all takes place. So we're already up to chapter 5 here, and one of our very earliest adventures took place in 1989. In fact, in March 1989, and the game date, you can see here, was the 4th of September 4333. And this particular game was about the slave lords whom we encountered in a place called Ravensport. And we decided, because we were basically goodly characters, you could be evil or you could be neutral, we were trying to resolve issues. At least that's what we finally settled into. And one of our earliest adventures was here trying to stop a gang called the Slave Lords from capturing people and basically collecting them as slaves. I can't remember all the details because it was a huge number of years ago now, but obviously they were being sold into kind of unacceptable service. And this was the island of the slave lords here where we went, and we actually managed to complete that task, and we set the slaves free. And the last paragraph says, and so nearly all of the slave lords were overcome, either in the battle which we had with them at the time, or in the volcanic explosions which were by chance which happened at the end of our battle, and it actually destroyed some of the slave lords as well. So 2 or 3 fairly minor slave lords were known to have escaped, and they fled to the coast, and we think they left by boat. And then there's a note at the end of every adventure which sums it up slightly, and then kind of gives you a bit of a foretaste, maybe only a sentence or two, for what's going to happen in the next adventure. So this here, chapter 6, took place from 1990 into 1991, and it's called The Dark of Irillion. Now, Irillion is a really major city in our world. I'll show you a map of it in a moment, but this explains, with these maps, it explains how we got there, and it says why we went there. But the tale is called The Dark of Irillion, and this is the trek that we made. It was quite really long lasting. We stayed in Irillion because we got there in 1990, and we were there until about 1994, I think, in the real time, and that was November mainly. Well, actually, it was September, October, and November. 4,333 in the game time, and what happens is we will see the map of Irillion in a moment. But it does tell us here that we met up with some people here Zotaquan and Terrell Guthdota. These became very long-lived associations. This was the first time we met them in that trip to Irillion. Here's what I was actually wanting to show you. This is the map of Irillion, and you can see it's a large city, a walled city. You can see that, and you can read all about it and so on and various things. And we carried on, and we did deal with the Dark of Irillion. We managed to overcome that problem. And then we go on to chapter 7, which describes our next very important adventure, which was that we encountered the temple of elemental evil, and we had to destroy, in order to get rid of this evil in this temple, we had to destroy the god Ios, who was in his temple. And this is what goes on in this description here, and there's quite a bit to it. We managed to get maps and plans of everything, and in the end we did indeed find the key source of this evil, which was the evil orb, and there was a chap called Suscarus, who was an alchemist, and he had created this evil orb, and having destroyed that, we had accomplished that major adventure. Here we go in chapter 8, we go into pursuit of Hydrek, Senshok and King Rolex. This is the rescue of the dragon Snowstorm. Now, of course, the game, Dungeons and Dragons, it wouldn't be much fun if you didn't have any dungeons, and it certainly wouldn't be much fun if you didn't have any dragons. But we've got a dragon here. We had to rescue the goodly dragon, Snowstorm, from his capture and it being held hostage by this chappie, Hydrak, and his mate Senshok, and King Rolex. We don't invent the names. Dave did invent a few of them, but a lot of them come from Dungeons and Dragons, tradition. You know, you play Dungeons and Dragons for a certain length of time and you hear about different things that have gone on and that make good adventures. Anyway, that's chapter 8. Quite short. We were able to help the rescue of Dragon Snowstorm. He was being held in an ice cave, and so on. So, chapter 9, the magician Meldred on the Isle of Trick. There were 2 islands called Trick and Track, little islands, and we went and this is the map here, right, because this is one of the islands, and we get boats and so on, and there's the island of Trick, much smaller than the main one. So there we are, and we met a couple of creatures. This, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, it's dragons and all other kinds of creatures you can imagine. That is a spectre, right? It's like, which is like a bit like a kind of ethereal ghost, and this is a Morkis, and I can't for the life of me remember what a Morkis was or did. And this is a Minotaur. Well, that's a bit like the thing from Greek mythology. So there we are. Oh, we also met this chappie for the first time in this adventure, who was called Abu Inslar, and he was the Padishah of Targnal Port. Now, Targnal Port was a very important port in the zone of the world in which we were at that time, and a Padishah is the name of a leader of a community, a title given to the leader of a community, a politician of the highest order, it says here. Anyway, there's various things going on with him. He was always a victim because people wanted his post of being a high up political figure. And this here is Targnal Port. and this is another big city. I mean, the detail in all this, there's enough to give you 5 years of pleasure reading this this book. You take your time over it because you spend a lot of time looking at the places of the maps and the routes that you take to get to places. Here's chapter 10, where we were in pursuit of a bandit called Krieger, and we visited some areas called the Dripping Caverns. That was a short mission. Then we went to the Tomb of Horrors in Yankosha, and we had this wonderful artifact which my character had the honour of guarding, and it's a magic mirror, the magic mirror of mental prowess, which we actually managed to get out of the Tomb of Horrors because it had been put there by the people who stole it. And my healer, Rowan, I didn't actually mention his name, but my healer, he actually got custody of this magic mirror, and it was very useful. But he did lose it eventually, but that's for another day. So here's this is all underground, this part there, and so we finished that, and we went to Zotquan's quest to get a key to a spell book. And during that mission, we had our first encounter with a carrion crawler, a very vicious creature where you'll find it in the darkest dungeons. And this is an umber hulk. It's like a human crab, you could call it, a human crab with claws and so on, but it's kind of human size, and it's an upright creature. Then we went to Deegan's course at Peach Farm in Lakenheath. Now Deegan was one of our characters, and Deegan's curse is almost like a task which Deegan had to do, and he did, and that was in the Invincible Overlord's domain. Then we went and rescued a Princess Jolene, and we went to her wedding. She got married to Viscount Luca, and we actually, first of all, we encountered an out-of-control zoo, and then we had another problem we had to deal with in a place called Grimlon, and then we finally got to the wedding. There was another distraction before that as well, because we had to do something in the library of Grimlon, and so that took us some time, and we had to deal with a pit fiend and a number of other creatures. Quite a long bit. This is the wedding here, which the Padishah, whom we mentioned before, invited us to go to the wedding of Princess Jolene to Viscount, her wedding to Viscount Luca. And so there's events there, and there's a gargoyle, like a kind of flying dragon, and so on and so forth. Chapter 16, the Tomb of Aetheling, a very good one. That was Aetheling the Damned, and this little adventure became quite big, and it took us quite a while to deal with, and there were distractions. For example, we had to go to the crypt of Istoris, and one of our characters, Salazar, he played a major part in that. Well, we are going to be here all day if I spend much more time on this, but we've got the Tomb of Aetheling the Damned, we've got chapter 18, the Dark Druid, very important, the Dark Druid, a chap called Guantatha. He was an evil, a master evil magician, who was definitely trying to defeat us because we were dealing with the ills of the world in which we lived, many of which had been created by Guantatha, the Dark Druid. There's some really fascinating stories in all this, and I know you will enjoy it. People definitely tell us that they enjoy this, and it's substantial enough. You know, it is expensive, but on the other hand, it is substantial enough to keep you occupied for quite a while. So there's the Iron Fist Guild, that story. This is Linap City, a place where we quite often went. Let's move through here. The Bars Draconians, and by now we are actually in the year 2001. So this is the 20-year point where we are now, and it's the 11th of January 4335. So I've just zipped through 2 years of gaming, 2 game years of gaming, and 20 years of real-time gaming. So, because we played, usually we only played once a month, but we played all night almost. We'd start from about 8 o'clock and go on till the early hours. Anyway, I mean, I'm not going to I'm not going to go through every page, but I just want to show you that it's highly illustrated in full colour. That, by the way, is an ankh egg. An ankh egg. Can you imagine meeting up with one of those? But it does tell you what these all do, most of them in the book. And this was the ruined keep, which belonged to a duke, or to the duke's cousin. And it was, I don't know, something happened to it, and we had to do the usual rescuing. This is this place is really important. I mentioned Irillion not so long ago. This is one of the other major places. This is called Viridistan, and it's the capital city of the city-state of the world emperor. So it's really important, and quite a lot goes on there. There's a peace conference after the Dark Druid and many other powers were all in a combined kind of, not a complete battle, but there was all this friction going on, and then there was a peace conference, but it didn't actually solve the problem in the end. If it had, we wouldn't have had anything else to do. This is again Tardnell Port, which we've already been mentioned and been to. So I'm not going to show you the whole lot page by page, but I am going to show you that there's the text and there's the pictures, and there's absolutely plenty to keep you enthralled by the story. So I'm just going to flip by. I mean, you can see all the maps, and this one is Felstor the Magician and the Obsidian Citadel. Okay, and then we've got a few more monsters and things, and then this was the Tomb of Albascor. I can't remember what happened in the Tomb of Albascor, but I'm sure you'll find it interesting. Here we are now into 4335, December, game time, and we're in February 2008. There's an interesting little thing, an acid beetle. Sprays acid at you, but he's not small like a beetle that we would expect to see. He's large. So there we are. Okay. I'm going to just flick through, and if I see something that catches my eye that I'd like to mention, I will, because I've talked for a long time about this. I can thoroughly recommend it. It is expensive. Now, I'm just going to tell you how you can buy these books. This one is not for sale on Amazon. reason is I think it probably costs more than most books that are for sale on Amazon. It is expensive. Don't be surprised if they're going to charge you 60 quid or 80, 70 pounds or something like that, or 80 pounds, because it's a big, well-produced book. And of course it's not sold by the thousand, but that is the hardcover version. You won't get that in Amazon. You have to find that on lulu.com, right? lulu.com, and when you go to lulu.com, there's a box with a magnifying glass, which is the search box, and all you need to do is either type in my name, Kenneth A. Spencer, or just Kenneth Spencer, or you can type in the Polychronicon A 35-year adventure, and then you can find it. I can sell you a copy as well, but I would advise you go to Lulu, but you can easily contact me if you'd like me to supply you with a copy. That's the only way you'll get the hardcover version. Now the softcover version is about to be released on Amazon. That's about to come out on Amazon. It's still going to be about 50 or 60 quid, I think, at least. Well, no, around about that, because it's nearly 400 pages, it's full colour, and of course it's a bit of a niche book, so we're not going to sell millions of that. But that is going to be on Amazon, and it's going to be on other online book sales, and if people buy enough of them, it will be in Waterstones and in all the international booksellers as well. This one is about £20 cheaper than that. The inside is identical, so what you're paying for with the extra £20 is you're paying for the hardcover, which is quite useful to have. So, thank you very much indeed for watching this video and listening to me go on about it. That is the Polychronicon A 35-year adventure. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, and bye-bye.